Let's all go on a trip into this big nebula. But isn't that dangerous? Oh yes it is. Oh yes. But I think it'll make a very good plot for a show.
Whee! Crash.
Oh, there's giants here. Let's go home. We can't. Then why did you bring us here? I told you it was for a good show. Hello and welcome to another episode of TrekHammer, where we're talking about every single episode of Star Trek from the original episodes right through to the modern day. And today we're talking about the Galileo 7. This is one of the best episodes of the entirety of the original series because it has two conflicting ideologies and it shows them in two different ways. Let's have a look at what we're talking about. So the story begins with Captain Kirk speaking to a galactic high commissioner. Remember, the Federation does not exist in Star Trek terms at this point. Technically, from a retroactive perspective, they are actually part of the Federation, but it's not named at this point, so we've got a galactic high commissioner rather than a Federation ambassador or a Federation admiral or anything like that that we would see in later stories. So we've got the Galactic High Commissioner. He is talking about how Kirk has to have these medical supplies delivered to a certain place by a certain time because it will help with the plague. Great story, sets a deadline for any of the action that goes forward, and there's the start of the plot. However, Kirk also has a conflicting requirement. If they find any quasar-like objects in space while they're going around doing their business, they have got to stop and investigate it. I don't know why, it's just one of their general orders. Quasars are a big deal to the Federation, or the not quite Federation. They find a quasar-like object, so naturally, Kirk now has a deadline to have a look at this thing and fulfill his mission parameters, as well as get these supplies where they need to go. So he sends Mr. Spock and 6 other people to have a look at this quasar. They go into a nebula and all of a sudden their ship doesn't work properly. The ship is the shuttlecraft Galileo. It crashes. It crashes on a planet that doesn't have any technology on it. It's very much pre-industrial. It's pretty much Stone Age. There's giants on the planet. They don't like the foreigners that have arrived. They attack and it's a problem. A person dies. Another person dies. Mr. Spock is getting it in the neck from everyone all the way through this. But he remains logical and consistent throughout because he is a Vulcan and that's how it is. And it's one of those establishing things. The moment that a Vulcan is in charge of a human crew or a majority human crew, they end up with conflicts. The humans are all right with Vulcans as long as there's a human in charge. That's kind of what happens a lot in Star Trek. We see it in Voyager as well when Tuvok takes command. And to a certain extent, we actually see it in Next Generation when Data takes command in Chain of Command Part 2. It's just one of those things. Humans are okay on ships as long as it's a human as the captain for the ultimate appeal to emotion, essentially. So Mr. Spock is having a lot of problems on the planet because he is trying to get everyone off as safely and as quickly as possible with the minimum casualties, and he is rigidly focused on that. It's actually not a bad idea. Mr. Spock is in the right, clearly in the right. Every time there's an appeal to emotion, it's for something that is ultimately unnecessary. I get that the crew want to bury the dead. They don't want to leave them out in the open for these monsters that are essentially killing everyone, for them to find and do who knows what with. I understand that, but Mr. Spock has a bigger priority. If he doesn't get all of his crew off the planet in a certain amount of time, then they're all going to be left out in the open for these monsters to find. They've got a very strict time limit. Meanwhile, Captain Kirk is on the ship. He's on the Enterprise, on the bridge, and he is very much in motion. The Galactic High Commissioner, on the other hand, is very rigid, very formal, very logical to a certain extent. He says, you have got to prioritize the people that these medicines you are carrying are going to help. There is a plague. We are going to send these medicines to help with the plague. Kirk, on the other hand, is very emotional. I will not leave my crew behind if I can do anything about it. So we get to see the logic versus the emotion from two different angles. And both, this is what I love about Star Trek the most, both are portrayed as correct. You can see why each person is doing what they're doing and why it is right in those circumstances. And that is the wonderful thing about Star Trek, especially the older Star Trek episodes. They don't treat you like a child and say, this is the right way of doing things. This is what you should think. This is what you should do. And we won't accept any other viewpoints. Star Trek presents both sides of a conflict and shows you why those people believe that thing, and then lets you decide which one's best. I love that because it treats you like an adult, a rational person who can make decisions themselves. Fantastic. So we have Kirk being emotional, Spock being logical, but the best part is near the end. Because of course Spock gets the people off the planet. We already know from the fact that there are more episodes of Star Trek with Spock in them that he's going to get off the planet. And if he's getting off, most of the crew are probably coming with him, especially Dr. McCoy and Mr. Scott. So, he gets off the planet. They manage to get back into orbit by using their phasers to recharge the batteries in the shuttle, essentially. And they don't call them batteries, but it's essentially they're recharging the batteries in the shuttle to get off the planet. But they can't stay in orbit. Kirk, on the other hand, is still scanning around. He's trying to send out other shuttles and say, scan the planet and find the people. But they're not doing it. And then his time runs out. Spock knows that the time has run out as well. So they've now got to make a judgment. And the rational Spock, the logical Spock, makes an emotional decision. He decides, look, we are going to crash anyway. If the ship leaves without finding us, we're all dead. And all that'll happen is we are going to have to sit here and watch as the ship burns up and then we die. So he decides, not on my watch, he makes an emotional decision to dump the fuel. Dump all of the fuel in one big flare. It lights up the atmosphere and the shuttle hurtles round the planet, leaving a big trail of fire, essentially. It's a big beacon, which hopefully the ship will see. It's an emotional decision because it's not logical to waste all your fuel. Meanwhile, Kirk, who has been emotional all through this because he wants his crew back, damn it, to hell with everything else, the needs of these few are going to outweigh the many. He knows his time's run out. He has got to leave now because at the point where he is at his deadline and he has to leave to get the medicines back to where they need to be at the right time, it doesn't matter of an appeal to emotion. The rules are the rules. He has to leave. But it doesn't say how fast he has to leave right now, because the ship can go at multiple speeds. It's not all or nothing. So he decides to play it technically by the book. He is following the spirit. It's a Mr. Spock style of decision-making here. Like, I didn't tell a lie, I just left out information, that kind of thing. It's an omission. He decides, yes, we're going to leave now at minimum speed, Mr. Sulu. So that he's giving them extra time to find the ship. But he's technically following orders. It's a fantastic thing. They've both switched sides at the end because both ideas are legitimate. Both ways of working are legitimate, and it's wonderfully done. So, of course, they're still there. The Enterprise is still nearby when the flare goes off, and they see it. Kirk turns around and picks the ship up, and there we go. And the whole thing just ends with the best thing, because, of course, Mr. Spock just made an emotional outburst, essentially. So Kirk and his crew have to give him a bit of a ribbon, you know. It's like, yeah, you're one of us. You're one of us. The people might have been treating you bad on the surface, but we know you're one of us. So we're going to give you a good old human ribbing there. And it's a lovely story. It's brilliantly done. I love it because Mr. Spock is right. But the other guys, they're right from their point of view as well. And Captain Kirk is right. But the High Commissioner is also right. The priorities are all there. And it lets you see that just because people have different views and those views conflict doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad or evil. It's brilliantly done. There are no bad guys in this. Even the antagonists on the planet, they're just defending their territory against invaders. That's how they're going to see it, aren't they? This the average thing. These cave people, limited resources, newcomers have arrived. well, that's a threat to us. We have to drive them away to protect our crew, to protect our family, our tribe, whatever it is. So even there, the antagonists aren't villains. They're just acting on their own instincts. It's brilliantly done. You know what? I think a thorough evaluation of this, I'm going to give it another 10 out of 10. Warp factor 10, Mr. Sulu, it's that good. But what did you think about this episode? Do you think I've missed anything? Do you think I got my interpretations wrong? I'd love to know what you think down in the comment section down below. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk Robinson, you've been watching TrekHammer, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye, and live long and prosper. If you like the show, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help create future videos. That's patreon.com/Zoe Kirk Robinson. And I've got an extra special thanks going out to Chief89, Sam Yates, Retro Mickey 82, Mo Henry, and George Bortorini. Thank you so much, guys.